Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The planned spin-off of South32 from BHP Billiton has turned bearish with an unprecedented number of sell recommendations by analysts. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Now, the iron ore price has been in a downward spiral for 12 months now, and Australia's treasurer is considering budgeting it at $35 a tonne. What impact will this have on BHP and the industry in general? Well,
it'll have a big impact on Australia as a whole, because what gold was to us in the old days, iron ore is to Australia. And you can see that Joe Hockey, who's the Australia's treasurer, he was saying, you know, when they first used to, well, his first sort of experience of budgeting was iron ore price at about $100, a tonne. And he's saying now they really are considering going in at $35 a tonne. Now that is pain and agony for a country like Australia, which has really done so well out of iron ore and helped to build, the infrastructure in China, and all of a sudden you've got to put the brakes on. And you can see the impact that it has at mining level. Mines are withdrawing from the industry. Atlas, I think, is one of them. And you've got Fortescue, wanting different strategies to try and protect itself. But on the whole, the bigger companies just want to keep going. But when they do that, like the Ryhoves and the BHPs, they actually start pushing everybody else out of the market, because they can still produce it at a fairly low price. Although, if you're looking to what Joe Hockey's saying, the UBS estimates that that really, if you take that down to $35 a tonne, it'll mean that those that are still producing, like BHP Billiton and Ryhove, they would only be earning a profit of $1 a tonne, wow. Which would make it really so negligible and marginal that one wonders when the whole situation will change. And people are talking about 3 years, they're not giving it a near horizon. Not like oil, which you see lifting a bit, and even the other prices seem to be not as badly hit as iron ore, which has really been smacked. And it was an ore that everybody was seeking. We were hoping that we would have a new Pilbara in Africa, and everybody was moving around Africa. All those projects are just now stopped. Nobody's moving on them. They'll wait until the situation changes, and all the forecasts are that it'll be a number of years before you could even consider doing that again. And we know that our own Exxaro, has withdrawn from its project in Congo. That was also because there were no logistics. But I'm sure when you look at what's happening to, the Kumba iron ore in South Africa, that share price has just been falling. And what a wonderful company it was only, 5 years ago, and less. It was paying out huge dividends. I mean, a lot of its 6,000 of its workers became half millionaires. With the last payout, they were ready for the next payout. Well, the next payout doesn't seem like being good, and it's all around the iron ore price. Tragically, it's just fallen out of bed. And we can see that even the Australian Treasury, looking to base its budget projections on an iron ore price of way a pale shadow of its former self.
And is this simply because of the slowdown in China's economy?
Well, if you look at the numbers, we get confused by percentages, because, you'll say that the Chinese economy was growing at 10% a year, and now it's only growing at 7%. But 7% of 10 trillion, it's a high, is a higher base. It's very, very high. So it's higher than the previous percentages were of the lower base.
It's what everyone wants to grow.
So it's very, very confusing. But it's a changed China, and it's less towards the very strident move towards infrastructure. And we were hearing, even from some of the biggest companies, they would give us off-record briefings, and I'm talking about 5 years ago. They were worried about the infrastructure developments in China. They were saying that perhaps they need to moderate them slightly, because they were building these freeways and they're building things which take a lot of steel, but this infrastructure wasn't being fully utilized. The strategy was that if you put the infrastructure in, then utilization would come. But even at that stage, I can remember a very senior official in iron ore saying he was worried. He'd just come back from China, and he was noting that some of the more remote freeways were being so underused that the farmers were actually taking 2 lanes of a 3-lane they'd leave 1 lane in the freeway, and they'd use up 2 lanes to dry their corn. Because, you know,
use 2 lanes to dry corn.
To dry corn, because this road, this huge super freeway, was not being used. It was underutilized. So the warning signs were there. But I think nobody, like with the oil price as well, you know, it just jumps at you. You don't know it's coming, even those who are studying the market all the time. And the new direction in China under the new leadership is also created a situation where, you know, the demand is not as strong as it was for iron ore, and we're seeing the consequences with BHP Billiton.
Now, moving back to BHP Billiton, can you tell us more about the Senate tax inquiry into BHP Billiton's Singapore marketing hub?
See, it's like a perfect storm. Everything comes at once. Now, BHP Billiton is an august company. It's very strong. And it is being seriously humiliated at this Senate tax inquiry to a point where it's now running reputational risk because it doesn't want to disclose, it doesn't want to reply to the most basic of questions, like, you know, what sort of revenue did you have through Singapore, your marketing hub, and what tax do you pay? You know, the answer is we are not answering that question.
Shouldn't it be in their books?
Well, it's certainly it's available.
Or is that why there's an inquiry?
And you know, and I'm sure that you know, when it comes to a thing like this, you must be on hot bricks as to know what to do, because the inquiry has come forward here. You know, you've got to answer the question. Should we answer the questions? And now they've been given 2 weeks to come forth with those questions. If they don't, then it moves to a higher Senate level, which is not going to be good for BHP Billiton and its shareholders. You know, already I've seen an unprecedented number of sell recommendations, you know, from analysts, mining analysts. So of course, it comes against the background mainly of the iron ore price. But then when you add to that, you know, reputational issues, it's not good. And pulled in as well as Rio Tinto, which has answered the question of its tax implications and how much tax it's paying in Singapore. And a lot of them sort of saying, well, it's such a small number in our big scene. But what if this becomes retrospective? You know, what if they say, you've been there for 20 years now, you know, pay up over that period. And apparently the Australian tax body, the ATO, has actually got the figures. So although the Senate is asking for them, the ATO's got them, done the calculations and saying, this is the tax you owe, which could be a very big blow at this time. But obviously, you know, the Australian tax authorities are also looking for tax money. They need the revenue.
Especially with iron ore at that price.
Exactly. You know, if the forecast is that the revenue is going to be so low, they're looking everywhere for revenue. And we know the previous Australian Prime Minister that was ousted, you know, he was concerned about all this reliance, this over-reliance on mining, and wanting to lift the taxes a bit some time ago, so that you know, the country could do more of a diversification, because it was very, very important. But that he was thrown out with you know, a lot of complaints from the mining companies. But one of the companies that is coming through very well through alacrity and offering to do things is Glencore. You know, in the Senate inquiry, that's the sort of quick decision making that you need when you come before a Senate body like this, because the whole nation is watching you. You know, civil society can turn on you, which is not a pleasant thing for a corporate body that wants to be a good corporate citizen. And all these companies realize the value of being a good corporate citizen. They don't want people to turn against them. And I think the only one that showed great sensitivity to that was Glencore, when they immediately told the inquiry, we will move our marketing hub from Singapore. Not that we're saying we're using it to avoid tax or anything like that, but we will move it because of the mood. We will move it immediately out of Singapore, and we'll now market our tax from Australia, you know, which will go down very well with the Australians. Whereas the other two companies are not saying anything like that, but they do say how they're business patriots, but now people want to see, what are you going to do? So it's a terrible situation that it's a perfect storm. You know, not only do you have the problems with your commodity price, but now you have all these reputational issues popping up at a time when you can least afford it.
Now, what effect will all of this have on South32 and South Africa?
That's the thing. South32, we were looking to a decision by the BHP Billiton shareholders in a matter of weeks now, that they were going to say, yes, they must demerge those South African, Australian and South American assets and move those assets out, which were the less earning assets, which sort of would allow BHP Billiton to focus on this big strength that it has and not to be sidetracked with the smaller businesses. But those businesses are still big. And, you could put them into the South32, which was going to be listed in Australia, the main listing, and then Johannesburg and in London. And you would have another option there, looking at the aluminium and the nickel. But now there's also bearishness around that. And, if you couple that to the problems of BHP Billiton and then the bearishness suddenly around the aluminium price, where, they found a mountain of aluminium that is on surface, which has pushed the price down, and not only pushed it down now, but it's pushed the forecast of the price down about 15% as you look forward. And we thought, well, the nickel price was also firming. They're talking about the outlook being 10% down. That then reduces the value of this, and you wonder whether they will be prepared to list it under these circumstances of volatility and turmoil. And you need a sort of a stable environment to do this. But again, BHP Billiton was looking to the spin-off of South32 to give us that additional productivity that it needs. And it did so well, in the last reporting of results. It actually had strong cash, and it continued with its progressive dividend. But you wonder now whether, because of all these external concerns or the problems around BHP Billiton's reputation, the issue of the Senate tax inquiry, is it not muddying the waters, for the shareholders? They need to see a clearer picture. And is it an ideal time, I'm sure people will be saying, to do the spin-off? Should we do it or should we not? And analysts saying, well, there's now a bearish outlook for it. It's something that may not happen now. You wonder, because the sweetener for South Africa, one of the sweeteners, and not only will we have our aluminium involved, the BHP Billiton's aluminium and the manganese and the coal as part of this, and then silver from Australia. But they're also going to have a sweetener. We were going to have a marketing hub, or a services hub in Cape Town, similar to the services hub in Singapore. Now, the latest headlines coming out, and they've been unconfirmed, is that BHP Billiton is actually paying no tax in Singapore. So they would certainly be paying tax in Cape Town, but against the background of this Singapore being seen for tax avoidance, perhaps that's why when Mining Weekly Online asked the question about what was the progress with the sweetener and the service centre that with 200 jobs, quality jobs down in Cape Town, they said at that stage, look, this is not the time to answer this question. So I don't know whether it's got mixed up in this whole problem with tax havens and Singapore. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
but
they really are avoiding answering questions.
Yeah. There is some. They want to just deal with clear-cut issues, one thing at a time, and you can't blame them. They've been caught up in a big scene, but they're not looking good. They're actually raising people's hackles. So I'm sure they're going to, in the next 2 weeks, come up with some answer, because they are a very astute company, a very well-established company, and an august organisation. So they'll have big brains thinking. But in the meantime, there is a risk to reputation, which is very damaging for a company.
Well, we just keep our browsers open to miningweekly.com and see how this goes.
Great stuff.
Thanks very much, Martin.
Great, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.